Hi everyone, I'm Jenna from the Changing Futures Community Engagement Service. In this video, we'll be exploring how neurodivergence interacts with other intersectional identities and how us as services can improve the way we approach intersectional people. First, what is neurodivergence? It refers to the different ways people perceive and experience the world around them. It includes conditions such as autism, dyslexia, ADHD, brain injury, Tourette syndrome, OCD, and many more. People can have one or multiple forms of neurodivergence. For example, you can have autism, ADHD, and dyslexia at the same time. Someone who isn't neurodivergent is considered neurotypical. I'll be using this word throughout this video too. Being neurodivergent can affect how someone communicates, forms thoughts, behaves, interacts with others, and much more. For example, communication could be direct and straight to the point, or it could jump between topics rapidly. Emotions may feel heightened or lessened than neurotypical people, feelings like shame, joy, sadness, or excitement. Sounds, words, or movements may be repeated for an extended period of time. It could be something less noticeable like humming or twirling a strand of hair, or it could be shouting out a sentence or a whole body movement. Responses to an event may also seem out of proportion to someone who is neurotypical. For example, people who are neurodivergent may experience rejection sensitivity, in which feelings of rejection are heightened. Maybe a slight change in tone of voice can feel like that person no longer likes them or wants to be with them. Neurodivergence is only one piece of the puzzle when building up someone's identity. It doesn't exist in isolation. Throughout this video, we'll look at how it interacts with being in the LGBTQ+ community, gender differences, ethnicity, and in refugees and migrants. We'll look into prevalence and stigma, and then go into some recommendations to improve how we can support others. Please note that most of the data used for this video looks only into ADHD and autism. However, recommendations and wider learning can be applied to all forms of neurodivergence. It's been found that people with autism and ADHD are more likely to identify as LGBTQ+. And people with autism are 8 times more likely to identify as asexual, and they are less likely to identify as heterosexual. Men with autism are also more likely to identify as bisexual, whereas women with autism are more likely to be homosexual. People who are transgender or gender diverse are 3 to 6 times more likely to have autism, and higher rates of other neurodivergent conditions like ADHD and OCD. This shows that all areas of a person's identity should be considered when delivering inclusive and trauma-informed care. But why is this? It's been suggested that due to the different ways of experiencing the world, neurodivergent people have been found to question and reject social norms. And this is similar to many LGBTQ+ experiences. So, with open-minded thinking and already going against the norm, it can open up a beautiful stage to explore gender and sexuality on a deeper level. Looking into more gender differences, the criteria for diagnosing conditions have been largely based on male-centered research, so female differences are often missed. This means the symptoms that are more likely found in males becomes the standard, and that is what is used to diagnose female experiences too. This results in a lot of female neurodivergent people being missed. So for every 1 woman diagnosed with autism in the UK, 3 to 6 men receive the same diagnosis. This isn't to say that more men have autism, it just shows how underrepresented women are. The average age of ADHD diagnosis is 7 years old for boys, whereas women often don't receive their diagnosis until their late 30s or early 40s. That's over 30 years of treatment and support being missed that boys and men have already been having. But why is this? There are many reasons why, but some are that neurodivergent women are more likely to mask their symptoms, making them harder to detect. This means hiding their experiences we spoke about earlier in this video. They are more likely to be diagnosed or misdiagnosed with other mental health conditions instead. And as they receive a diagnosis much later in life, it reduces access to early support and interventions. Think of it as two people each break a leg. One has a cast and crutches earlier to support healing, but the other is left to heal themselves, and by the time they get support, their bone has already healed in the wrong position, and so that same cast won't fit them. Moving to ethnic minority groups, different cultures will view and diagnose neurodivergent conditions differently. Some may not even acknowledge it at all, and instead see behaviours as a mental health disorder rather than a learning disability. Neurodivergence describes behaviours that are different to the norm, and these norms vary between cultures. The norm depends on the values that culture holds and what they see as a deviation. For example, we diagnose dyslexia, which reflects our value that everybody should be able to read. And when struggling to maintain eye contact, in Western culture, we see this as a trait of autism, and we value holding eye contact as a sign that we're engaged and listening. But children in some Asian and African cultures are taught to not make eye contact with adults when speaking out of respect. So when these two values cross over, it can be confusing to have your beliefs and what you are taught flipped. In adulthood, the crossover of neurodivergence and ethnicity also impacts outcomes. This can be due to stereotypes of different cultures and how they're perceived. Does the person's neurodivergence play into a stereotype or go against it? Let's use the workplace as an example. This can show up in areas like recruitment. What kind of person are they looking for, and who will be chosen for this role? Or in performance evaluation, what behaviours get praised in the workplace and what gets flagged? And in career progression, what kind of person gets promoted, and are they supported throughout their role? This can also apply to other intersectional identities too. Often people are held back from greater outcomes because of other people's expectations and assumptions. So, to overcome the challenges of being neurodivergent, people may mask or code switch. Code switching is where someone changes their entire way of speaking to blend in with who they're with. For people from ethnic minorities, this could show up as suppressing traits like repetitive speech or movements, or hiding the things that make them stand out. Changing communication style. This could be literally like tone and volume, or more subtle like using less slang or changing accent. Mirroring behaviour. This can look like copying how the people around you act and speak to blend in. Scripted responses. Maybe small talk is difficult, and so the person learns a few responses that they can say without much thought, like, "I'm fine, thank you, how are you?" every time someone asks, "How are you?" even if it's not true. And pushing through discomfort to fit others' expectations. If we use the eye contact example from earlier, it could look like forcing eye contact even though it makes you uncomfortable, or forcing to not make eye contact even though it's natural for you. More neurodivergent people may experience masking or code switching. It is heightened in ethnic minority groups because of those extra layers of being perceived as different to others. For example, balancing the culture of home versus other environments. This could be the language you speak, tone, or using slang. Maybe at home it's expected to talk expressively and not hold eye contact, but at work you have to speak conservatively and look people in the eye when talking. Carefully controlling behaviours and expressing emotion differently. Maybe it's natural to talk expressively with your hands or be more animated when you speak, or maybe showing full emotion may not be deemed appropriate in one place, but it is in another. For example, crying loudly and expressively in public versus at home. Changing behaviours to avoid reinforcing stereotypes, maybe not wanting to come across as too aggressive or too smart or too loud. Masking neurodivergence on top of masking cultural differences is exhausting. There's also differences within refugees and migrants. As mentioned before, some cultures and countries don't acknowledge neurodiversity. So this could be an extra new thing to consider when arriving in a new country. Signs of neurodiversity may be overlooked and misdiagnosed as something else. For example, behaviours of neurodivergence may instead look like symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, or what might be expected from someone living through war and conflict. Maybe heightened sensitivity to noise comes from being neurodivergent, but professionals may assume it's trauma from the loud noises of war. And attitudes to medication and intervention may also be different, particularly if the person is from a culture that doesn't traditionally follow Western medicine. This could be at diagnosis stage of what neurodivergence is, or treatment stage, such as not wanting to take ADHD medication. Neurodivergence can also be heavily stigmatized. In some countries, neurodivergence is looked down on as a disability or seen as a curse on that person or their family. So to avoid negative associations from others, they may not seek a diagnosis for themselves or for their children. And even if the person understands neurodivergence and wants support, healthcare can be inaccessible. This can be around language barriers, explaining symptoms, or even navigating the various pathways, understanding new services and registering for a GP or hospital appointments, or learning new terminology around conditions and treatments. Well, now that we know about all these things to be aware of, how can we as services ensure we're neurodivergent aware? We can understand intersectionality. By being aware of how neurodivergence overlaps with different pieces of someone's identity. Just by watching and sharing this video, we're taking some good first steps. Adapt your approaches to fit the needs of the individual. Don't assume that one size fits all. We've learned that it doesn't work that way. Improve your communication. Use clear, direct language to avoid any misunderstandings. Provide information in multiple formats. If you're having a verbal discussion, make sure the person knows that they can take notes or print out key points as written takeaways. Allow extra time for processing information and responding. This could be giving a few minutes for the person to think in a conversation, or let the person have some time to think before replying to an email or a work message. By being patient, you're providing that safe space for the person to feel understood and provide their best response. Create sensory-friendly environments. Having spaces with reduced noise, dimmed lights, or quiet spaces, either throughout the building or have a dedicated sensory room for any staff to use. This can be beneficial for everybody. Allow people to use tools like headphones, fidget toys, or have breaks. This isn't disengagement or being distracted. This is preventing them from doing that or becoming burnt out. Also be aware of masking. As we've learned, many neurodivergent people may hide traits to fit other people's expectations of them. Don't assume someone is coping well just because you can't see their difficulties. Provide check-ins or let people know directly that this is a safe space to be themselves and ask for help at any point. So how can we build general inclusivity? Build cultural awareness. Be aware that some cultures view neurodivergence differently or may not recognise it at all. For some people, you may need to go right back to the basics of learning about these conditions. Be mindful that cultural behaviours may look like symptoms of neurodivergence. Keep the wider picture of that person in mind when making decisions about them. Help to reduce stigma. Provide education and encourage open discussions about neurodiversity. This could be with anyone you're supporting, but also with people you live with, work with, or anyone in your community. Create safe spaces for people to discuss their experiences. Be vocal about your support and make people feel safe to talk. Improve accessibility. Offer competently translated information and use interpreters where possible. This ensures everyone accurately understands each other and can get the most out of your support. Provide flexible options, such as online meetings, smaller groups, or include more breaks. This ensures neurodivergent people can be more engaged, and it can even benefit neurotypical people too. And finally, listen to lived experience. Involve neurodivergent people in your service design. They understand what works and what doesn't work the most. Always ask what people need instead of making assumptions. Everyone is different, so we must approach everyone differently. Thank you so much for listening to me and learning with me. I hope you found this video useful. If you'd like more resources on neurodivergence and how it interacts with different living experiences, please get involved with the Understanding Neurodivergence and Multiple Disadvantage PDU Learning Series, and sign up for the PDU e-bulletin to keep up to date with new learning opportunities on everything we've looked at or chances to get involved. Just type the link shown into your search engine. Thank you again and see you soon.